Hello guys, today I had already made a video about some of the ways to get important resources or to get resources a little bit easier, but today I want to fixate a little bit more on arena because of course there is a bit of strategy to this. It's not just beat up all the mobs, it's you have to fight things or you have to kind of take a look at what compositions you're fighting against. And while you could definitely argue that C bigger number, don't fight opponent, or C smaller number, fight opponent, could be the way that a lot of people play. I do want to kind of analyze what kind of defenses or what kind of arenas, concepts, strategies you can actually make use of to make it a little bit more annoying for people that are trying to fight you. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that, as you can see here, there are plenty of maps that you could alternate between. You can go between arena 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of which are totally fine, but I don't know exactly, or I'm not entirely sure which one is particularly the best, primarily because of the next strategy that I'm going to talk about, which is kind of like a mind game in a sense. Now, again, to be clear, the reason why arena is so difficult is number one, because you see the opponents that you're fighting, of course, but in terms of what kind of strategy they're going to be, or what kind of strategy you're going to be facing, or what kind of units you can use to kind of combat certain strategies or playstyles, some of these teams might just be untouchable. Now, the reason why I say that, the complexity of this game is also a little bit intense is because although you could definitely argue, again, that, well, I have 84,000 points here, if someone fights me and they're 75, there's like a good chance that I'm going to lose. Even in equally matched, even in equally matched matches, I guess duels, between two opponents, the things that you actually want to keep an eye out for when it comes to team composition or the way that you position your opponents is number one, again, the maps, but also number two, the way that, or the certain characters that are being picked. Now, again, if you guys are new to AFK Journey, you may or may not have seen the current rate up character, which is Vala. And an interesting kind of really important thing about Vala is that she is somewhat of an assassin. Now, primarily or initially, she definitely sits in the back and she kind of waits and waits and waits until she gets her bar, and then you could shoot, and she'll dash over, sometimes going invisible, depending on what, what tier or what level they are or what certain skills they have access to. But because Vala is so prominent and so important, and there's definitely a lot of people that are playing characters like this, Sylvina, one of these characters, or some of the undead characters, essentially have characteristics of an assassin, you want to be a little bit careful about how you position your team. Now, something that I've seen a decent amount, I would say, is that because so many people are basically running Vala, and of course a bunch of people have a character like Cannaaaa, Vala's stun on her ultimate will kind of just disable your Cannaaaa. And again, if your Cannaaaa gets stunned, that means no Mr. Carlisle. That means that you're kind of open to getting like stunned by a character like Temesia, the character that has like the horse and rides around, or any other character. You can't move around, you can't do damage, you can't compete. And of course, that's obviously like a really big problem. So a strategy that I've seen a couple people kind of set up, now whether you want to take this or not is completely up to you, but something that I've seen is that there are some people that will run a tank in the back line and then have their Cannaaaa or their healers or their supportive characters a little bit further forward. Not so much so that there is no front line, because that's absolutely ridiculous. And of course, it depends on maps and compositions and what you're fighting against. But since you're on the defensive side and you don't actually have a say in what people fight you or how they fight you, something that a lot of people have seen is that they just keep losing to people that just, again, snipe or blitz the backline instantly, and they're kind of getting wins on teams that they shouldn't be winning against. But since that's the case, I've seen a number of people, especially some of the higher tier defenses that I fought against, like literally talking about the people that are like 300, 400,000, literally just putting their defenses or putting their squishier characters a little bit forward, and then baiting one of the tanks, like a character, maybe like literally maybe just like Temesia, and leaving their Thorin or leaving their Lucius in the front so that you can deal with the front line and you still have the front line. But now you have a character that's going to be running forward anyways with a character like Temesia that just charges through. Or they'll use someone like Lamont, who's like the Lamont, which is the elephant that also does a little bit of charging. But now you have a target on like a tank, or you're using Vala's targeting system on the tank, and you're wasting a little bit of that time. Now, again, in terms of the different arenas, I definitely think that a full-blown Arena 1 defense usually spells spells trouble for you. There is no complexity to an Arena 1 map, which is why I think in most, or if not 99.99% of cases, if you end up running an Arena 1 team, you have to be running something absolutely ludicrous, like a 4 like assassin celestial sort of team if you really want to make it work, because otherwise in most cases it's very easy, as you could tell, to just have Vala immediately shoot out like the corners. Or again, if you have someone like a Thorin, or if you have a bunch of warriors, they can just run up straight. And if your front line isn't tanky enough, or if they die, even if they're resurrected as Thorin, if Thorin is downed and there's no one directly behind him to take, any additional hits, the thieves, the rogues, the assassins, the warriors, whatever you want to, you name it, you got it. They'll just run past you and they'll just end up hitting the backline, which is obviously not very good. That obviously just means that you instantly lose. So again, in terms of the different defenses, I would definitely recommend trying to get to a point where you can get something like Arena 2. Now, mind you, again, Temesia, if you aren't familiar with this character, she's a super good character when it comes to CCing or stunning and disabling the backline. And that the fact that she can just basically go through walls makes it so that if you were for some reason trying to play a pocket composition or a protect the carry backline composition where you have a team like, let's say, you have Hewin and you have your Cecia in the backline, and then you change out, I don't know, any of these characters for frontliners, you have like Lucius and stuff, and you just pray that you have healing. Well, that doesn't really work if they just run characters, again, like Vala, or if they end up running snipers in the back, or if they have Temesia and they just run through your defense. However, again, having something like this, at least a wall, does make it so that if you are going to be fought against someone, or if you are going to be fighting against certain defenses, they do need to bring someone that has backline access and not just frontline meatball tanking. Because in all honesty, guys, if you've ever seen a Thorin and a Lucius alongside in a Hewin together, there is basically no way that you can fight that front to back without the enemies, or without the Hewin, Lucius, and Thorin team composition basically out-sustaining. It's even worsened or like multiplied if you actually end up using someone like Smokey and Mirki. Smokey and Mirki, if you aren't familiar with him, with the characters, do like an AoE heal that is a little bit more annoying, in addition to giving attack buff. So again, if someone were to say, I don't know, run something like it's probably just Lamont. I don't have that character though. But if you were to see that alongside the Mirki or the Smokey and Mirki, you'd be really frustrated, and you'll definitely see this combo in adventure or in the general episodes, which is why I'm so annoyed and frustrated whenever I fight this. But thankfully, that's not the case. Okay. So now, although I am not able to get into the offenses, a lot of what I just said or mentioned about defense when it comes to Arena also applies to offense. Now, again, keep in mind that sometimes the best defense is somewhat of an offense. There are certain compositions where you can't just break into them. If they have a bunch of healers, if they have a bunch of tankers, if they have the Luciuses, if they have Hewin and things of that, things of that nature, it will be really hard to frontline or kind of just front to back a team like this. In cases like this, having assassins are really nice, and if you don't have access to it, I highly recommend characters like Leica or Lika, whatever. I'm pretty sure it's Leica. I think that's how they say her name. It probably is worth it for you to have AoE access through characters like Leica, or even have characters like Miriel to kind of deal AoE damage to hit the backline. So it's not just like you're hitting the front line endlessly. Now, again, not many characters or not many compositions or players end up using compositions that's just front to back anyways. But just in case if you were running something like a frontline, rogue composition where they don't have access to the backline, or if you're going to use a bunch of warriors like Brutus, just keep in mind that if they have frontliners that are very tanky and are knight oriented, or if they're tank oriented, or have chargers like Temesia, you're gonna have a really bad time if all you are is running a bunch of melees. Now, again, so long as you have some backline access, that's kind of the name of the game right now. If people are stalling out the timer, by the way, with like really slow compositions, I highly recommend you take a look into Vala, because again, if there isn't anything to really keep Vala in check, if you can kind of just let her go off the rails with a character that heals her, or even with tanks in the front, the way that Vala works, I believe with one of her skills, is that if you end up killing, or if you end up getting one of your targets low, she kind of goes invisible, or she becomes stealth and is a little bit harder to hit, or I think just outright ignores being hit entirely, outside of AoEs, of course. But that's kind of insane value, so that's something to take into consideration, or pick Otherwise, if you are looking for another kind of decent tank buster composition, you always could try to stall versus stall and have an OD and pray that the constant poisons are enough. However, I've noticed that OD is not nearly as good, especially when you get silences or the enemy opponent can heal. Just keep that in mind. But that's basically my general early guide to Arena. Otherwise, in all honesty, guys, although you may kind of push and pull and struggle to try and beat certain stages, the ultimate truth is that if someone is about like 30,000 points above you, 20,000, 10,000 points above you, you're going to struggle, and that's not your fault. That's kind of just the way that the Arena and Arena in general is played. I'm not a super huge fan of that. I wish there was a little bit more diversity in terms of that, because I know that a lot of strategy that I have is kind of just thrown out the window the second that you have more, you know, equipment or more imprints than the opponent. But again, in terms of value, so long as you're hitting successfully or you're doing successful hits, that's great. But that's, again, everything I have to kind of offer for PvP. That's how I personally have gotten to, what rank am I? That's how I've hit rank 35 right now. Of course, I wish that I was higher. I wish that I was hitting more characters or hitting more people. But as a general reminder, the Arena ranking does not reset until Monday. So try to get in your hits as soon as possible, guys. Thanks again, though, for watching. I hope you learned something. If you did, though, make sure to like, comment, turn the notification bell, and subscribe. I appreciate it so much. Thank you again to everyone that's been supporting me through this. Thank you again to AFK Journey for sponsoring this video. But yes, I will see you guys all in the next one. Adios.